The People's National Congress Reform, PNCR, presents Nation Watch.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Nation Watch for today's Sunday, 23rd October 2022. We will be discussing some matters of national importance today, and joining me in studio today is the leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition, Aubrey Norton, Member of Parliament. Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me, Marvin, and a good day to your listening and viewing audience.
It's a pleasure to have you. I believe this is only the second time that we've managed to get you on Nation Watch since we've restarted. And I'm sure that viewers will be very interested in what we're going to be discussing today. I want to start, if I may, by making reference to a recently published letter in the national newspaper, I believe it was Kaichur News, where a dinosaur politician, a name of Clement Rohi, suggested in his writings that the APNU plus AFC coalition has never been interested in free and fair elections. How would you respond to Mr. Rohi's suggestion?
First of all, it is Rohi. You don't expect anything of consequence from him. The second thing is, Rohi comes from a political party. If you go through its history, you will see that they don't believe in free and fair election. Even in their own party, he himself cried out about that. The next thing that needs to be said is that if you're interested in free and fair election, then the first thing you would want to do is to have a clean voters list. But it is the said Rohi who suggested that you don't need a clean voters list. How is it on earth you could have credible elections when the list that the elections are based on is not credible? And so when one hears someone like Rohi speaking, you will recall that he was forced to say, like, "Goat bite me." I would not make much of anything that is said by Clement Rohi. Clement Rohi has been a failed politician all the years of his life. So I would not pay much attention to him. What I would say is that leading to the 2020 elections, we were cleaning the voters list. When the PPP ran to court, etc., and that suggests to me that they have an interest in a bloated list. They have an interest in rigging elections. And if you go back to even the early days of Balram Singh Rai, for people who read political issues, etc., we know what would have happened there. If you go to the by-elections with Dr.
That's
Jalan,
the East Bank.
Yes, you know that they have no interest in free and fair elections. Their interest is in to be in power, to control and to dominate. And anything that will promote democracy doesn't necessarily fly with them. So they don't have a democratic tradition. You know, they talk, for instance, Jack Lew, who I consider to be a fool in some regard. Here you had an election in your party in which 35 people elected your presidential candidate. But you turn around to talk about the PNC, in which more than 1,000 people elected it. It shows you that it is not about truth, it is not about policy, it is about political pandering. And that's the nature of the PPP.
It's interesting that you refer to the 35 persons identifying the presidential candidate as an election, because from the information available, there was a lot of arm wringing to ensure that the 35 went down a certain road, or else there would have been consequences. But there is a hot topic out there right now, local government elections. And all sorts of propaganda is being spewed by the People's Progressive Party. Here's a party that, notwithstanding the call from all other political organizations, from civil society, And even in the face of the reports and recommendations from those who were observing the 2020 elections, everyone is saying there's need for a clean voters list. But the People's Progressive Party goes ahead and names a date for local government election. How do you treat with this level of disrespect for an entire nation?
Well, first of all, you have to understand the PPP. They have no interest in local government election. Let us understand the PPP came to power in 1992, held local government in 1994, and never held them again. They were putting IMCs in place, and they destroyed the local government system. They have no interest in local government. That's the first thing. The second thing, having come to power, the APNU, AFC, held local government elections twice in 5 years, which manifest a commitment to local government. Why is the PPP announcing local government? They're announcing local government because they want to shift away from the focus on a clean voters list. I still do not believe they are going to any local government elections. They are politically posturing. Now, if you want democracy to prevail, then of necessity, you will clean the voters list. What I think they're trying to do is to push for a local government election so as to be able to say that had local government with the same list, you can have national elections with it. The PPP has no interest in the will of the people. If you look and see how they govern, it's all about them and their political elite friends and family. They are not concerned about people exercising their right to determine projects in their communities, etc. They have a Dildonian minister who wants to tell every NDC what to do. And again, that is an indication that there's no interest in local government. We will continue to focus on a clean voters list. I noticed Irfan Ali saying that the opposition should participate. He can ensure the opposition participate. All he has to do is to let us clean the voters list. There is no one who think they could win, who think they are popular, that would want an election with a bloated list. If they are serious about democracy and they believe their own propaganda that they could win in any circumstance, then automatically they should have no problem with a clean voters list. And the reason why they have problems with a clean voters list is that they know, years ago when people thought the PPP was interested in democracy, they weren't. They felt they had an inbuilt majority, that based on the ethnic statistics, they were kind of automatic winners. Now, the dynamics have changed. Ethnically, no particular group dominates. The group has to depend on other groups to win an election. And therefore, what that has done is that it brings to the fore that the recognizes that it is difficult to win an election at this stage with a clean voters list. And so they are more of a clean voters list. If you look at the elections, you will see the PPP has never really gotten a big majority in this country. And a lot of times, they are not manifest as a popular party, but they try to portray that they are popular. And their own actions now, their own poor governance, all of those things are leading to a situation where they are making themselves unelectable. I gather when Jack Day was abusing out his ministers when he took them for the bus ride, he himself told them that their behavior is making the government unelectable. And then when they left and there was a discussion with two of the ministers, they said This man got the audacity to talk about making people the PP unelectable. The allegations against him in Vice News. He is the person responsible for making the PPP unelectable. And not only that, when you want a man who has been a failure as a politician, who spent many years in government, if we talk about Burnham, we could talk the Suicide Linden Highway. We could talk that when Burnham came to power in 1964, apart from Georgetown, Linden, and a few areas, there were no paved roads. It is Burnham who paved the roads throughout this country.
Zero nursery schools.
Zero
nursery schools.
He developed the education system. He put the NIS in place, a number of things. When you hear from Jack Dale, what you hear? A greedy, corrupt man who always comes up with a project that they can make money on. If it is not one laptop per family, it's scaled on. I mean, who could be more useless than Barry Jack Dale? When you see the failed projects that he was involved in, at no stage under him did the economy see 5% growth. They inherited 7% from Desmond Hoyt. There is nothing except corruption that Jack Dale can claim.
Speaking of making parties unelectable, there's a purported results of a poll which suggests that the PPP is riding at a popularity rating of 43.4%, the PNCR at 43.2%, which is right there, and the AFC at 7% with the others at 6.4%. Is this perhaps responsible for this rush that is taking place to do or to attempt to do so many things at the same time while stumbling over yourselves as the PPP is doing in government in terms of money and corruption?
It points to the visionless nature of the PPP. I heard Jack Dale talking about who has vision and who don't. If I go to Little Africa, they run and go and do some work. I went into Bushlock, they do some things there. Go into Linden, they run, they do something there. What they're doing is responding. They don't have a vision. And here I'm speaking about a vision to take Guyana forward in which the people's benefit. Their vision is a couple of them becoming filthy rich at the expense of the Guyanese people. There's a big argument in the PPP whether Jack Dale is thieving more than Irfan. When a political party arrives at a point where they have to discuss among them which leader is the biggest thief, they're really in trouble. And so one can understand the poll numbers. I think they have taken the decision that they have to attack me. All they have tried would have failed. First, they were focusing on me, Lyman, and Sporting and around. Then they recognized they were working. Irfan Ali started to sport too, except without rhythm. You know? So you see, they are responding to what done. We've been talking about a people-centered development, and you heard them beginning to talk about a people-centered development. But people wouldn't be fooled by that, because essentially what they do is not aimed at the people. It is aimed at putting money in them and their cronies' pocket. I have consistently Jack Dale and Irfan Ali to put the assets against their legal earnings and show in a normal system how they can be as wealthy as they are. They cannot do that because nothing they do can stand scrutiny. The Vice News thing only gave the tip of the iceberg. The high levels of corruption in the Ministry of Agriculture is raising another challenge, because the levels of corruption in the Ministry of Agriculture is now making the minister a competitor in the struggle to be the most corrupt in the PPP. So I can understand the polls. And I believe with time, it will come out that they are going to be beaten. They are holding on to a bloated list with the hope to use that list to rig. But you know the PPP is in crisis when they have to bring back Rui. I mean, it's not an ordinary derelict. You know, it's no ordinary dinosaur. He is outdated in every sense of the word. Not to mention the fact that he was never blessed with intellectual capacity. So don't worry, we will stay focused and we'll be able to deal with the People's Progressive Party.
Now, sticking to this issue of local government elections for just a little bit longer, GCOM's chairman has voted with the PPP commissioners to ensure that GCOM does not do an internal assessment of its own processes relating to elections. The PPP has come out with a commission of inquiry into elections. So there's no internal assessment by GCOM. There's going to be soon a commission of inquiry in motion. There is a petition still before the Court of Appeal in Guyana. And a lot of this revolves around the list of which you spoke a short while ago. How sensible it is to go into any election, not just without a clean list, but in the face of GCOM's refusal to assess itself and the PPP's insistence on a commission of inquiry.
For the PPP, it makes sense because they have no interest in free and fair elections. Don't forget, you know, the PPP is not in power by winning an election free and fair. And when we talk about election petition, it raises a number of issues. I think the CCJ continues to destroy its credibility. And you know, one of the things we must know, and I think these judges are learned judges, they must know familiarity breeds contempt. Yeah. And they made themselves close and familiar, at least some of them, with an attorney general who doesn't believe in democracy, who clearly has no sense of decency. And therefore he thought that it made political capital for him to put out the judgment before the appointed time. And it tells you the lack of decency, this lack of interest in morality, this lack of interest in the rule of law. People to be blamed here is the CCJ. They have allowed a closeness to this PPP cabal that gradually destroyed their credibility. And when this last incident occurred, they had to be infuriated because they know it showed a direct link between what they were doing and the People's Progressive Party. So there is the elections petition. We have seen there are some people who believe the case it's over. It isn't.
Sorry to interrupt. Before you get to that, because I have that as a substantive point for us to discuss. But in the face of this COI and GCOM's internal refusal to do their internal thing with internal assessment, with the chairman of the commission essentially reducing GCOM to a one-person commission because the other votes really don't count.
Well,
but still we're going into local government election minus a clean list and with these two elements.
Well, first of all, the intention was to have an independent chair. Unfortunately, the chair has compromised herself, and politically she does everything that the PPP dictates. So I agree with you, really and truly, it is a PPP commission because they put up whatever they want, there's some discussion, there's no responsiveness to valid points made, and then they go ahead and do what they want to do. So she has made the elections commission into a joke, no one will listen and hope that something will come out of the commission that reflect independence. Everyone sees her as a tool of the PPP. PPP supporters, happy with it. But it doesn't change the fact that she is seen as a political tool and she has no interest in ensuring free and fair elections. Politics aside, if you are managing an institution and it just had a major activity, at minimum you review it.
Yeah.
And so her refusal to review it tells you of the nature of the woman.
There may be things to conceal.
Good. So I think the push is towards maintaining a bloated list. Has nothing to do with local government election. It is the mechanism they are using to stretch out the process, to feel out how people will react. And then in the final analysis, what they want is to stay with a bloated list, a bloated voters list.
Nandlal again. Nandlal, the Attorney General of Guyana, he has signaled that the PPP is taking to the National Assembly proposed legislation treating with electoral reform. One aspect that he's talking a lot about is including in the legislation a mechanism for the removal of dead people from the list. How amusing is this really, given what is already in the law and is not being used? And how sensible is this? Is
All
it?
right, let's go back. Let's go back. You put a COI in place to ensure an election petition doesn't go through. That tells you almost immediately the mindset of the PPP. I want to tell you something else before I go to that. They sent us a letter inviting the APNU AFC to the consultation. The APNU AFC responded in time, on time, and said we will participate in the consultation, if only to let our views be known. Mr. Shearer was written to. So, shows. But yet they went out and put that, I want something people participate, institutions participating, but the AP and UAFC isn't participating. When they had the names of our two nominees, they know we are participating. But it is the normal dishonesty of the People's Progressive Party. Now, like I said, their focus is not on democracy and cleanliness. Now, the proposals they are coming with, we will have them dealt with at the consultation. But what is needed is a clean voters list. And no mechanism that is controlled by the PPP will give you a clean voters list. Don't forget, we struggled while in opposition from 1992 to get them to put a system in place where we could scrutinize the system. That is how you have the government having scrutineers in the process and the opposition. They're trying their best to get rid of that. Their whole focus is on domination and control, not democracy. It has been complicated by their obsession with oil wealth and wanting so much of the money for themselves that they're now going to do anything, including subvert the electoral process to achieve their objectives. And it is in that context we must understand. But we are saying to them, we need a clean voters list, and we only accept mechanisms that permit us to clean the list and ensure a credible voters list. If you don't have a credible voters list, you cannot have credible elections.
Comment on the fact that there's a provision already in place that says that the registrar of births and deaths shall make available to the Elections Commission periodically, probably at the end of every month or so on, a list of those persons whose deaths have been registered. And the Guyana Elections Commission is required to act upon that. Why do you need fresh legislations to remove dead people from the list? This is obviously a distraction, isn't it?
It's not only a distraction, you have to understand the nature of the PPP. They are trying to create the impression that there is no mechanism to remove dead people, when there is. And so they have to talk about legislation. Now, your big worry, my big worry, is that they have compromised the registrar department. They put Ejil brother, a minister brother, to be in charge of the registrar. So even the legal mechanism that exists has been compromised by moving legitimate public servants and putting a political hack. And so, whatever legislation they would come with, there will be difficulties because the registrar office is no longer run like a ministry. It is a political institution. It's a politicized institution in which the PPP has put in place a political hack. And therefore, they have further compromised even the system that exists to clean the voters list of dead people. And you have to understand that their interest, again, is not in law, is not in truth. Their interest is political control and domination, and that is where it has to be there.
Before we come off of this, is the People's National Congress reform pursuing or continuing to pursue action to ensure that there is in fact a clean voters list, and how are those actions progressing?
Well, for now, we think a lot of people in civil society believe there should be a clean voters list. We have re-raised in the international community their own call for a clean voters list. To the extent that it is the PPP alone in a corner, I think it is progressing well. We have begun some protests weekly. We will see what results that bear, and then we will move to the next level in terms of fighting for a clean voters list. Isn't it strange to you that about 6 months before they're declaring
a date for
election, what that says to me is not interest in any election. They are putting out feelers to see how people will react to the things they are doing. I don't believe that they genuinely believe that there's going to be an election on the 13th of March. But let's watch and see.
And if there is, that is not likely to be local government election. Viewers, you're tuned to Nation Watch. I am your host, Mervyn Williams. With me is leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton, and we're having a conversation on matters of national importance. Let's shift focus to the petitions. There were 5 judges there was a panel of 5 judges hearing this matter at the CCJ regarding whether or not the Guyana Court of Appeal had the jurisdiction to hear and determine an appeal in an election petition, I believe it's number 99, which was dismissed by the Chief Justice of Guyana. And there was what they will call in boxing a split decision, with 3 judges saying, look, there lies no appeal in the Court of Appeal in Guyana to this matter, basically. And 2 other judges going beyond this whole question of an appeal lying with the Court of Appeal to say that Article 42 of the Constitution, I believe it was, could be interpreted quite easily to treat with this elections petition as an ordinary matter, and therefore an appeal to this petition matter lies at the full court of Guyana. Yet the PPP is jumping all over the place suggesting, well, the people won, we won, we won, we won, and so on. But the judgment appears to be very instructive. How do you, as leader of the opposition, view the decision, notwithstanding all else that comes with it?
I view the decision as one that indicates that there are problems in terms of the judicial system.
That's in Guyana or within the Caribbean jurisdiction?
In Guyana, as well as the involvement of the CCG. In fact, if you listen to a lot of the arguments, you will recognize that some of the judges don't understand Guyana. And therefore, they might be ruling based on the political culture where they would have come from. They don't understand the dictatorial culture of the People's Progressive Party. The next point I want to make is this. As far as I understand it, they all agreed that this really was a matter for the full court. And therefore, we have to take the actions to ensure that there is the next step. Now, I have been in consultation with lawyers, both Guyana and abroad, and many of the lawyers are saying that you cannot dismiss a petition because of a so-called simple error, and that substantively the petition should be heard. Another lawyer pointed me to a direction in which this same petition can be addressed. We are going to finalize our position on it and take the requisite action to ensure that this is not the end of the road. While we focus on preparing for elections, and we know there will be early elections, we also want the truth to come out. And for the truth to come out, we have to continue to do the work to ensure this matter is aired in the court and justice is done and our people benefit from what I will call a legal, sensible, correct decision. Anil Nandulal, in typical style, ran out to say the people would have won. But the people in this country saw the recount, blow for blow, and they know the people were cheated in 2020. And everything will be done to ensure that the truth as it relates to the election would have come out. They brought this COI so that they can use it for propaganda and say, oh, this came out, this was revealed in the COI, etc. And they believe that they can threaten people with subpoenas with the hope of being able to pervert the course of justice by bringing a COI when in fact there is an election petition or two that should be heard. So we are seeing through their political posturing and will deal with it.
Now, the supporters of the People's National Congress reform and the supporters of the coalition are being fed some propaganda by the People's Progressive Party in this matter to convince them that they have lost. Now, you have just made the point that this is not the end of Petition 99. This is the message I am sure that our viewers would be very interested in. Now, for emphasis, can you say to our viewers definitively that you are in fact, as leader of the opposition, actively still pursuing this whole question of Petition 99 in their best interest?
The answer is yes. There's no need for anything else. The answer is yes. The people of Guyana deserve to have that petition heard. Let the facts that were garnered in the recount and other processes be made public, and it be established that this is an installed a legitimate government.
That aside, our viewers are aware, I'm sure, that the other petition, I believe, number 88, is still active. It is before the Court of Appeal in Guyana, where 3 judges all ruled in a unanimous decision that the appeal court has the jurisdiction to hear and determine that matter. And I believe that that is scheduled to be heard sometime in November. How confident are you, how confident is the coalition that going forward there will be a successful outcome?
I am confident that once the law is followed, we will have the kind of outcome. It does appear to be that in some instances the law isn't followed, and that it is more political and other interests that are determining. But we do believe that once the law is followed, it will succeed. We also believe that there are opportunities. Some lawyers say no, but some I've discussed with, that there are opportunities for the facts to come from the recount, etc., and inform this decision. I was reading some of the things that occurred in the legal system in Kenya, and we saw in some regard, was it Kenya or Uganda or both, a situation where it is fairly well established that you cannot dismiss a major petition. This is one that is based on facts from a recount, on a technicality. And therefore, I am optimistic that it is not the end of the road. However, even though I say it is not the end of the road, I want to continue to focus our members and supporters on continuing to do our organizational work to ensure that when the next election comes, we'll beat the People's Progressive Party. The fact that the People's Progressive Party is afraid to clean the list indicates to me that they see themselves as vulnerable and dependent on rigging to win an election.
You spoke briefly to the apparent situation of judges at the CCJ not being familiar with what's happening in Guyana. One particular judge, I believe the name is Ramadar, I'm not sure. Jamadar.
Peter Jamadar.
Who has said that, I apologize for getting the name wrong. Jamadar is the correct name. He alluded to the 1980 Constitution of Guyana. He spoke of the transition towards a socialist democratic system of governance. He made the point that our constitution is unique in terms of the Caribbean, and therefore a lot of attention ought reasonably to go towards understanding the constitution in treating with our matters. How far do you think that that has gone in terms of the outcome of some of these decisions regarding constitutionality in Guyana?
Well, I think Jamadar, and I hope it's the same Jamadar, that they have the same name, that I read on governance and a number of other issues. And he seems to be the kind of person who doesn't see law in isolation from the society. And to the extent that he doesn't do that, he tends to seek to understand the working of the society in terms of informing his legal position, which I think is a good thing. Even in my student days at university, I always worried when case law alone determined. I always worry when we say this is the law and it has to be like that. People forget in South Africa, separation was legal, but it was wrong. And that is one of the problems with the present approach by some judges to law. They stay within the confines of precedent, etc., and tend not to be more jurisprudential and seek to go to the philosophy, the intention, and the direction that the law should be going. And I believe once that happens, you will have a more enlightened approach in not only the courts in Ghana, but the CCJ as a final court in the Caribbean. So one has to read what Jamadar and the other judge that kind of dissented said, and you will see a kind of a superior type of reasoning. And I think that needs to be promoted and cultivated. You know, it does come over to me as if the CCJ sometimes even doesn't operate on law. If you read some of the things that Saunders said, you would have thought that that would have informed this decision. But it seemed not to have. And so we're in a little flux, but we have to work it out.
My last question on the issue of the petition, specifically the one recently determined by the CCJ. Has the coalition taken measures to ensure that this betrayal of the trust of the court, the apex court, this really terrible bit of action by Nandlal that threw the entire legal system into disrepute, is punished? Has the party or has the coalition taken measures?
As far as I know, action was taken on that the very night or very early the next morning in terms of drawing to the court's attention. And I think it was because the morning when you were listening to the judgment, you heard it was coming out. But like I said before, the CCJ is to be blamed because they allow familiarity to breed contempt. And Nandlal has become contemptuous of them because he believes for whatever reason they can do as they like, this meaning the PPP. And so they have to take blame. And it would be worse if they don't take action and deal with him condignly. If they don't, the trust in the CCJ will be further eroded.
Now, there's a perception out there. I'm sorry, I said my last question on this issue, but this is a follow-up. The perception out there is that Mr. Selwyn Peters, was the only man who had the guts to stand up and there at the CCJ and say, look, this happened, Nandlal violated, and so on. But you're saying that contrary to that diet of information, the coalition took action even before the actual hearing.
But Mr. Peters, as I understand it, was part of the process with the coalition. To separate Mr. Peters from Roysdale Ford, etc., is disingenuous. In fact, on the night when I think I was a person who sent it to our lawyer to show that what had happened. And the very evening we spoke and we agreed on what was happening, and I know that it happened. And he did say at the time, I think he called me back before the night was out and established that he was in consultation with Peters and that action was being taken. But it is the nature of the PPP to want to, and not only the PPP, there are some people who are conduits of PPP messaging that would want to make it look as if it was Peters alone and that the AP and UAFC didn't have the gumption.
And that there was no connection between the coalition and Mr. Peters.
Well, the truth of the matter is that isn't true. And Mr. Peters was involved and as part of the coalition team.
Well, viewers, the leader of the opposition has just set the record straight with respect to representation of the coalition's interest with regard to Mr. Nandlal's betrayal of the trust of the CCJ. It was a team of
he didn't betray the trust. He showed who he is. You know, they say a drunk man reveals what a sober mind conceived.
So I'm happy that viewers have benefited from this clarification, and I trust that there will be no more speculation regarding Petition 99, as well as the conduct of Mr. Nandlal and the source, the origin of the representation on behalf of the coalition in that regard. You tune to Nation Watch. The leader of the opposition is with me in studio, and we're discussing matters of national importance. Mr. Norton, there is this statement from Bharat Jagdeo that is making the rounds. As we come closer to program time, Jagdeo is on record. There is a video or something circulating in which he refers to you, Aubrey Norton, as a useless leader. Comment on that, please, for the benefit of clarity and for the benefit of our audience.
Whenever you hear Bharat Jagdeo's name, you think of Sevons and Puran. Because if you have inside the septic tank filth, the only thing will come out is filth. Jagdeo is on a mission to shift focus away from the levels of accusation against him on bribery and corruption. And so what he does is try to shift away from his errors, from his indecency, from his contempt for the people of Guyana, from his over excess. And he tries to focus on others rather than himself. Now, Jagdeo has no right to talk about anybody not having a vision. There is no evidence that during his time as president, he had a vision. What Jagdeo did, and I said it before, is he wakes up a morning, comes up with projects that they can make money on, corruption, and then announce it. The Skeldon Sugar Factory. It is the same incompetent, dishonest man that told us it was going to reduce electricity costs. It was going to increase the production of sugar. And he gave a whole line of reasons. And the billions that were spent, or the millions that were spent on Skeld went down the drain or draining their pocket. And that is their hobby. Then you came in the fiber optic cable. I remember I was part of the debate in Parliament where we asked them, why don't you use, I think it was only GT&T at the time, what GT&T has, and link with the private sector. These are the people that talk about private sector development. Link with the private sector. And I was in that debate because I made the point. Link with the private sector and let us be able to do the same thing without investing billions into a fiber optic cable, which you didn't do a proper feasibility study about, which you knew nothing about, except that it offered you the opportunity for good corruption money. And at the end of the fiber optic cable, they were richer. But today, the Guyanese people have no access whatsoever to this thing that came out of Jagdeo's head. Then there was going to be this packaging plant, which will contribute to improve sales in international market because of modern packaging, etc. And then more, that disappeared. No packaging plant to talk about that will improve the quality of packaging of our products and allow it to be exported. I think I hear they talking about transforming it into some probably place to train people in oil and gas. It's just like Jack Dale. Go through the history of projects linked to this nitwit who seems to believe, you know, I wish I had in the PNC somebody of his gender kind that could respond to him. You know, the common man would say, and this is what some common people say to me, Mr. Norton, don't follow Jack Dale with that womanish behavior. And so I respond to him by saying, when I get somebody that can behave like him, I will put them to respond to him. But for now, I will focus on his lack of competence. The Guyana economy did not progress under Jack Dale. Under Jack Dale, by the time he left government, poverty had increased in Guyana. Corruption had increased in Guyana. The NIS, he virtually bankrupted the NIS. This is a man who destroyed the life of people at New Building Society for his own personal ends, because people in that institution believe they should not invest their people money in some wild scheme conceptualized and operationalized by Jack Dale. This man is incompetent. This man is not somebody who you can go to his record. Let him show us from his record the evidence. Let him identify the vision he had, and then show us the projects that realized his vision. And then you'll recognize that he's visionless. But you know what he's doing? He's trying to get to talk about me having no vision. Though many things that I have outlined, they follow. What vision they have? They can't even take the nation's money and come up with mechanisms to deal with the high cost of living. If Jack Dale was of any consequence, he would have taken on dealing with the high cost of living as a priority. Because even when you go into his constituency, the major concern is cost of living. You know what he said? They ain't got nothing more they could do. He said that. He is that incompetent. We have outlined a number of measures that he can borrow. Remember, Jack Dale was president when Grove Diamond was developed. He is so intelligent that he left office without doing an alternative road for people to get out of Grove and Diamond. And now they are going on like if they have some initiative. No, they are rectifying their incompetence. Show me a housing scheme under Forbes Burnham or done by the PNC. A large housing scheme in which there is one entrance in, one entrance out. None. South Prime Belt was properly laid out. Tuckburg was properly laid out. Amelia's Ward, where he claimed that he developed the normal liar he is, was developed with many exits. The only housing scheme that I know, I think Tushen might fall into the same category.
Yeah, one entrance.
Good. One entrance to Tushen. This man is an idiot. Which child wouldn't know that if you put thousands of people in one area and you give them one exit, you are going to develop gridlock in traffic? People must judge those things. He can say what he wants about who's useless. The most useless person in this country is Barry Jack Dale. And his uselessness is not only his incompetence, but it is the high level of corruption that occurred under him that caused we to be in the state that we are in. The only thing Jack Dale shown that he could build is probably 2 Prado Villas. All of them were structured to serve his friends, his family, and the PPP elite. So we shouldn't take Jack Deo seriously. We should all establish that he's a failure. He has no success to his name. You have most of the athletes not in Region 3. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a stadium for athletes to develop. But if you were serious, you would have put the tracks in areas where athletics are developed, and give those people access, and then expand out to other areas to ensure that you develop their sporting capabilities. Not so, Jack Deo. The athletes, Lyndon brings home the most medals in this country, whether he likes it or not. Is he insinuating that they must go to Lenora to get a modern track? The man has proven to be a fool. The man is incompetent. His only skill seems to be to bully his political party to ensure that he stays in control. If he has skills, let him free up the party. Let Prasad, Nandlal, Irfan Ali, and I don't remember who's the fourth one that wanted to run in the last election. If he has skills and he's democratic, allow the party to elect its leaders. We had a democratic process in which more than 1,000 people elected the leader of this party. But here is a man who is clearly incompetent, clearly obsessed with power, clearly does not want the PPP to go out of his grasp. And so he controls, dominates, and ensure that he gets who he wants as candidate. And now you're seeing the signals like he wants to get rid of Irfan. But the poor boy Irfan must understand, if you were made by an individual, the individual may very well have the power to destroy you. If he was elected in his own right, democratically, then he would have had the people of the party behind him. And I'm saying to you that I was elected by the people in our party, both at home and in the diaspora, and I have the confidence of the majority, a significant majority, more than 2/3 of the members of our great party. And so we don't take Jack Deo seriously, except we need more mechanisms to stop he and his cronies from carrying away the natural patrimony. And we have to do that by organizing to beat them in the next election.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aubrey Norton, leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition. Thank you very much for sharing these last 55 minutes with us. I trust that our viewers are clearer in their minds now about a number of issues that we have discussed, ranging from local government elections to petitions and to the game that the People's Progressive Party seem to be playing. I want to thank you, viewers, for joining us and staying with us. Join us again next Sunday, same time, same place, for another edition of Nation Watch. I'm your host, Aubrey Williams. Thank you very much for staying with us.